Is for geometry, section 2.3. The notes is number 11, apply deductive reasoning. Okay, make sure you put your name, date, and period, or I'm going to take off points if you don't start doing that. The essential question is, how do you construct logical arguments? And logical arguments are deductive reasoning. And to construct a logical argument is to do law of detachment and law of syllogism are the ways to do logic arguments. And deductive reason, you have to have facts or definitions or properties, and you are allowed to use the law of logics to make a logical argument. So you got 4 things that you can use to do deductive reasoning. It's not like your other reason. The inductive went off experiments, but deductive is off of actual events, facts, definitions, properties, or logical statements. One of them, there's 2. The first one is the law of detachment, which a lot of times I'll say this is the LOD. And in the LOD it says the hypothesis is a true statement, or is a true conditional statement, is true, then the conclusion will also be true. So we have 2 truths taking place. And a lot of times we will change, in this one we change the letters, and I'll put it here. They usually use a P, and the little arrow means implies. Q is a true statement. Then the second thing they'll say is P is a true statement. And then your third sentence will be Q is a true statement. So there will be actually 3 steps you'll see here in a minute, and that may make sense. On the second one is called the law of syllogism, which is the LOS. That's what I like to shorten it to. And here it says if these statements are all true, and here it says the hypothesis P, then the conclusion. So if P is true and Q is true, then they state the Q, hypothesis Q, then the conclusion R, then the following statements are true. Here's your third statement. So here's the first one and the second one, and then they're going to ask you to write the third sentence where you state that the hypothesis P and the conclusion is R. Now this one, it looks kind of confusing, but basically over here on the side, this is P implies Q, then the Q implies a new statement which is labeled the R, and then the last third statement that you'll be writing ties the 2 things together. See how the Q's overlap? If I cover that up, you'll have P implies R. That is our final statement that we'll be stating when they ask us to write them. Alright, let's put some words to this now instead of all these letters. On the first example, they're going to use the LOD, law of detachment. So you can see this in action. So it says, okay, if we have 2 angles have the same measure, this is our hypothesis, which we call the P. Then, here's the conclusion, which is going to be our Q. They are congruent. So if 2 angles have the same measure, they are congruent. Well, then, this next statement for the LOD, the second part says I now got to restate the P in a true way. Well, the P says 2 angles. I need 2 angles, which I have A and B. They have to have the same measure. Well, they have an equal sign and an M on the outside. That means the measure of angle A equals the measure of angle B. Does this restate the P? Yes, it does. Therefore, I have to restate the conclusion. So my third sentence, because here's the first one, there's the second one, they're always going to want you to write the third sentence. I have to state the Q in a true way. If I look at my 2, it says that these 2 angles are equal, then I have to say they are congruent. Now, when I go with the congruent, I drop the M. I no longer have the M. I said angle A and angle B, and I put the congruent symbol between them. And this is a true statement. Okay, on number 2, they want us to use the law of syllogism if it's possible, because you can't always necessarily do that, to write the statement. We want to write the third statement. So if I look at the first one, it says if, now after the word if, the electrical power is off. Okay, there's my P. Then, and here's the second part, here's the Q, the refrigerator does not run. So if I go to the second sentence, the refrigerator does not run, which that's restating the Q again, then the food will spoil. The food will spoil is a total different phrase here, so that means that is my R. So I need to write my third sentence, so here we go with the third one. I need to tie, I'm noticing P implies Q, the Q implies an R, then I need to state P implies R. So if the electric power is off, then, and the R statement is the food will spoil. And then I have my third statement. Okay. If I look at the second example, it has, ouch. It says if 2x is greater than 10, that is my first statement, that's the P. It has 2x is greater than 7. That's my Q. This is my P. Then it says if x is greater than 5. Well, if I'm looking at this, I don't see that in either one of those. So that means this is my R. It's a new statement. And then once again, it has 2x greater than 10, which happens to be my P. Is this following my sequence? Well, if I'm looking up here, P implies Q. I have that. Q implies R. Well, here I have R implies P. So this one is an invalid statement. I cannot, oops, okay, I can't spell invalid. Put an I in there. Let me get my white out. Okay, let me write that beside it. This is an invalid statement. I cannot make a third sentence because it's not following the pattern of the law of syllogism, and it is not following the pattern of law of detachment. It's not following either pattern, so this is an invalid statement. Okay, number 3. This is decide whether inductive or deductive. So we're looking for either one. Is being used to reach the conclusion. And then explain your reason. So explain your reason is tying it to inductive or deductive. Okay. Angela knows that Walt is taller than Pete. She also knows that Peter is taller than Natalie. Angela's reasons that Walt is taller than Natalie. Okay, so the first statement is Walt is taller than Peter. She also knows that Peter, here's my Q, is taller than Natalie. There's somebody new, so that's my R. Now Angela's reasoning is that Walt, which was P, is taller than Natalie, which was R. So this is a P implies Q, Q implies R, therefore P implies R. This is the law of syllogism. So therefore we're using we're using deductive reasoning. I kind of wrote this backwards. Is our answer, and the explanation is it's using LOS. Let me put this in the correct sequence. If I look at the second one, it says Josh knows that brand X computer costs less than brand Y. Alright, so here we go. Brand X will be my P. Brand Y will be my Q. All other brands that Josh knows of cost less than brand X. Well, brand X, once again, okay, was P. All the others is something introduced as different, so that would be my R. And then he says Josh reasons that brand Y, the brand Y was a Q, must cost more than all the other brands, which was an R. Alright, looking at this logic, X costs less than Y. Everything else costs less than X. Therefore, Y costs less than everything else. No, that's kind of twisted around. Does it work? No, I do not believe it does, because P implies Q, R implies P, and then it says Q implies R. That is not our pattern at all. So this the true statement, but since this is not following our P implies Q, Q implies R, and P implies R, that means this is inductive reasoning. This is a pattern. Okay, there's a pattern that exists. And if I'm looking at this logically, X's cost less than Y. Everything else costs less than the X, but the X costs less than the Y, so the Y is the most expensive. So the Y's cost more than everything else. That is a true statement, but it's based on the pattern, the reasoning. That one's tricky. That one is tricky. Alright, let's look at C now. Let's see if we can figure this one out. So for the past 3 Wednesdays, the cafeteria has served macaroni and cheese for lunch. Okay, so this is a pattern. It says Dana concludes that the cafeteria will serve macaroni and cheese for lunch this Wednesday. Okay, so for the past 3 Wednesdays, this was an event that was taking place. So that means this has to be inductive reasoning because it's based on a pattern, a sequence of events. The last 3 Wednesdays we had macaroni, then this Wednesday we're going to have macaroni. Okay, here are 4 independent practice problems where you're using the law of detachment on 2 of them, and then the law of syllogism on the last 2. So answer those questions, and then make sure you answer your summary so you can get full credit.